President Bashar al-Assad receives congratulation cables from Russian President Vladimir Putin, President of Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim Jong-un, and the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on His Excellency's re-election. Nasrallah congratulates Syrian people who renewed trust in President al-Assad. Syrian Arab Army eliminates non-Syrian terrorists in the countrysides of Damascus, Aleppo and Daraa. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Yarado Krikorian with the news in English. Foreign and Expatriates Ministry denounced the European Union's statement on Syria's recent presidential election as a flagrant violation of the international law that provides for respecting the country's sovereignty and non-interference in their internal affairs. President Bashar al-Assad received congratulation cable from Russian President Vladimir Putin on his landslide victory in the presidential elections. President Putin affirmed that the results of the elections indicate clearly the great confidence of Syrian people in President al-Assad, wishing him success in his mission. President al-Assad also received a congratulation cable from President of Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim Jong-un. President Kim Jong-un affirmed that these elections constituted an important step in the struggle of Syrian people to overcome all challenges to protect national sovereignty and restore security and stability to the country. President al-Assad also received a phone call from Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, in which the latter offered congratulations for winning the presidential elections. Maduro said that the elections constituted a political and electoral victory for the Syrian people, and that the strength shown by Syrians inside the country and abroad by voting constitutes a clear message of support in the struggle against terrorist groups and their supporters. For his part, President al-Assad thanked Maduro for the call and the firm position he and the Venezuelan people took in standing alongside the Syrian people in the face of terrorism and attempts to destabilize Syria's security and stability. Assembly Speaker Mohammed Jihad al-Laham met with the Belgian parliamentary delegation which came to support Syria against terrorism and its supporters. Al-Laham stressed that the Syrian people said its word in the presidential elections and no one in the whole world had the right to interfere in its internal affairs. Al-Laham asserted the Syrian government's determination to fight terrorism and restore security and stability. He clarified that the victories of the Syrian Arab Army in its war against terrorism made the change in the public opinion, where the European countries which support it started to fear its repercussions on its lands. The Belgian delegation stressed its support with Syria, its army and people who are facing this war under the cover of democracy and freedom.
We saw, of course, the elections. We saw that there was a massive turnout from voters. That were millions and millions of Syrians voted, more than 90%, I believe, but almost 90% for Mr. Assad. This means that Mr. Assad is the legally elected president of Syria and that the people support him. So that is what we could see here. And this was not what was in the Western press. Again, they are very blind when it comes to looking at the situation like it should be. They are ideologically blinded by the way, let's say, the Americans and Saudi Arabia and Qatar try to influence the way the Syrian people have to live.
The re-election of President al-Assad for a new term has astonished the whole world.
Celebrations in Damascus as Syrian President Bashar al-Assad wins a third term in office, getting almost 90% of the vote.
The Western media was forced to convey the truth. The BBC correspondent said the Syrians voted for the president and danced carrying President al-Assad photos. The Washington Post newspaper said that the Syrians have voted and approved the failure of the U.S. policy. New York Times said that al-Assad's victory is a failure for all his opposers. Associated Press said that all the Syrians were insisting to vote for al-Assad. President al-Assad has been able to confront all kinds of pressures and emerge victorious against his enemies, thanks to his strong army and faithful people. The U.S. British newspaper and research centers claim that President al-Assad's popularity retreated, but these claims were refuted as President al-Assad won the competition made by Al-Mayadeen TV channel as the Personality of the Year despite the distortion attempts. The West received a big shock on May the 28th when Syrian expatriates flocked to the Syrian embassies worldwide to cast their votes in the presidential elections. On the 4th of June, the world became convinced that the Syrians elected the president freely, voting for a bright future for their homeland, insisting on fighting terrorism and restoring security and stability for the homeland.
Hezbollah Secretary General Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah congratulated the Syrian people and leadership on the success of presidential elections. Speaking during a memorial service marking the death anniversary of Sheikh Mustafa Qasir, Nasrallah applauded the elections as the most important event that happened recently and saw high public turnout, which he described as an achievement and victory for Syria and the Syrian people. He said that the elections constituted a political and popular declaration of the failure of the war on Syria, stressing that whoever wants a political resolution should cease all support to terrorists in action, not words. Mar Ignatius Aphrem II, Patriarch of Antioch and all the East and Supreme Head of the Universal Syriac Orthodox Church, said that the success of the presidential elections in Syria and the victory of President Bashar al-Assad are a victory for all honest Syrian citizens. In a letter of congratulation, Patriarch Aphrem II expressed his sincere congratulations to President al-Assad for winning the elections, praying to God to help and guide him in his work. The people of the occupied Syrian Golan celebrated the victory of Dr. Bashar al-Assad in the presidential elections. The celebration began with a march through the village of Baqata, followed by an oratorical festival in which participants said that President al-Assad is the leader who will lead Syria to safety. Participants in the event, who included hundreds of Syrians from occupied villages and Palestinian delegations from Al-Jalil and Al-Muthallath, asserted that President al-Assad's victory is an honest expression of the Syrians' love for their leader and a token of fealty to Syria and the martyrs. Syrian citizens in Russia, residents, visitors and students participated with their relatives and brothers in the homeland, their joy and happiness in achieving the presidential elections and the glamorous win achieved by President Bashar al-Assad in a democratic, transparent presidential elections. Welcome back. In Homs, Syrian Arab Army units seized 8 kilograms of TNT explosives along with other materials that used in manufacturing explosive devices. The car was on the side of Al-Wa'ar neighborhood. The seized car is a pickup loaded with vegetables and fruit as it was heading to Al-Wa'ar neighborhood. U.S. President's National Security Advisor Susan Rice admitted in an interview with the CNN network that her administration was offering fatal weapons for the armed terrorist groups fighting in Syria. Rice's statement came as news reports said that a U.S. plane landed in the Jordanian Al-Mafraq airport loaded with fatal weapons to be distributed to the terrorists operating in Syria. The Austrian Al-Zeitung newspaper disclosed that about 50 Austrian terrorists returned from Syria to Austria, describing them as a time bomb that threatens the security of Europe. The Daily added that the Western governments became in direct confrontation with terrorism when they decided to send terrorists to Syria. The Daily went on to say that the Western governments began to intensify security measures to confront the danger of the terrorists returning from Syria to their homeland. The French Liberation newspaper published an article by researcher Mark Hicker, who said that thousands of European terrorists headed to Syria to fight along with the armed terrorist groups. He added that the crisis in Syria has attracted thousands of European terrorists over the past 3 years. He concluded that the return of these terrorists to Europe is very dangerous and will last for several years. Finally, the French The Express magazine stressed that the French authorities were trying to sue the French citizens involved in fighting along with the terrorist groups operating in Syria. The magazine added that about 20 citizens were facing judicial cases on charges of cooperating with criminal gangs. The Daily pointed out that most of the cases were against French citizens who collaborated with criminal gangs that have relations with terrorist organizations. With this, we end our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more details about Syria and the region and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. Now to latest business and market news with Nariman Qassam, but after a short break.